Hey everybody, welcome to Future Whenua Yarns, having conversations that matter because conversations become matter.
That's becoming our tagline now, isn't it?
I think we should stick with that.
Yeah. So Rob here, and obviously Zeb alongside me. So second podcast, we're getting into things now. We're starting to really feel the momentum moving. And yeah, it's a stunning time of year down here oddly stunning, seeing as everyone else apparently is getting rained on and snowed on, and we're having glorious sunny days. So best not to look the gift in the mouth too closely.
Blue skies, sunny days, just a little bit of rain in the nighttime, not bad. And you've been out feeding sheep this morning. Rob's running the baleage at the moment, and I've been on the crop. Hoggets are eating up the multi-species crop, doing really well. We're grazing that at about 10 tonne, and it seems to be holding them up. So.
Yeah, no, they're looking happy and a much calmer bunch than last year. It seems with the hoggets. Yeah, I had my trials and tribulations of learning how to work with younger sheep last winter, so I'm enjoying the slightly more relaxed pace this year.
Yeah, the 2022 hoggets are a little more respectful of the electric wire.
Yes, yeah. So, getting into things, who are we talking to this week?
Kaila Colbin, who is a legend in just what we're talking about. We talked mostly about E Tipu, which is an agri-summit coming up in about 2 weeks' time. So it was really cool to talk to Kaila in lieu of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So topics you covered off. I mean, we're talking obviously E Tipu. You've got then Boma, which is a larger organisation.
Yeah, Boma is the organisation that organises E Tipu, and they're just operating at the highest level.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I went up to E Tipu last year or the year before, just after we'd had the first Future Whenua Summit.
That's right.
And I was just blown away by the level of execution at such a high level. It's not necessarily something we're aspiring to in two different styles, absolutely, but it was cool to observe and be a part of it.
Yeah, there's a military level of precision that goes with Kaila's events that's I admire, but I don't aspire to, because it's not the way we think about how to make things work. But it's impressive.
In my fashion, I went up and offered to volunteer, so I was sort of in behind the scenes and listening, and they're talking about what do they do in this 15-second break, and I just come off the inaugural summit, and we had speakers that were going triple the time they had allocated, and we were just letting it flow. So
yeah, we were definitely the everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face kind of thinking.
But it was really great talking to Kaila, and I was excited about this year's E Tipu, and now I'm even way more excited. Really was good.
So you're going to be heading up, right?
I'll be heading up, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great opportunity to connect with other people in this space, and also just learn from some of the masters.
Absolutely, yeah. So if you do see Zeb at E Tipu, don't forget to go and pin him down and talk to him for a little bit.
Absolutely, come say good day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's basically our sort of pre-interview wrapped up nicely. So basically, as per usual with almost all podcasts. Subscribe, follow, like, share, comment, do all the things that everyone says, because we desperately need it getting started. So anything you can do is a massive help. And without much more, what would you say, stalling for time, let's get into the interview with Zeb and Kaila.
Enjoy the yarn, everybody. Kaila, it's really nice to be connected with you. I'm sure that you're absolutely flat out right now in preparation for E Tipu. And that's primarily what we're here to talk about. I'm really excited about attending. It's an agri-summit, the largest food and fibre summit in the country. It's something that we're definitely aspiring. It's an inspiration for us at Future Whenua with our summit. And I really want to just get some information about what we can expect, and also just your really interesting character and an inspiring leader, and you're doing so much to progress, I guess, society, and you're really working on many levels on doing that. So we can get into a bunch of that as well, I'm sure. But if we start with E Tipu and just with your rich background and you've been involved in Singularity, and I just wonder, I don't think you're a farmer. I don't think that's part of your background. So what was it? Why create a food and fiber summit?
Yoda, great to see you. Thank you so much for having me here for Future Whenua Yarns. I'm very honored to be invited. And that's a great question because you are dead right. I grew up in New York City. I moved to Aotearoa, New Zealand 17 years ago, just over 17 years ago. And when I first moved here, I literally could not tell the difference between a sheep and a goat. So, I have no farming background whatsoever. But my company, Boma, the purpose of our company is to be more intentional, intelligent, and courageous about the future. And of course, if we're going to work on an intentional, intelligent, and courageous future in this country, we can't really do that without engaging with the primary sector. So when we first started thinking about what that might look like, one of the first things we did was we sat down with some trusted friends from the sector. And our question was twofold. Number one, this thing that we're looking at building, would it be useful? A, and B, are we the right people to do it? We're not an events company. We're not a company that just kind of comes up with products and tries to push them onto the market. The only reason for us to run an event is if we think that it might serve some kind of contribution to the sector. And the feedback we got from that consultation was 100% it's needed, 100% you should do it, and make sure you're engaging with folks in the sector who have deep understanding of what it's like on the ground. Because one of the things that we absolutely are not interested in doing is, sitting outside the sector, pointing fingers and going, well, why don't you just do it this way, when we have no idea what the challenges actually are for folks. So what we've done is we've pulled together an incredible brain trust of folks who have really extensive lived experience in the sector itself. We've pulled together all sorts of advisors and folks that we check in with. And then we combine that with our global networks, with our expertise, with our understanding of broader global trends, and use that to pull together a program that I think is pretty unique in this country in terms of the breadth and depth of it. So we're pretty proud of it and looking forward to it.
Wow, that's an awesome process. And it's cool to hear that you're consulting with people across the industry, because farmers don't like to be told what to do from townies. That's an absolute. So
and fair enough too. If I were a farmer, I wouldn't listen to my advice.
Yeah. And so this isn't so much just for farmers, it's for agri-business people, it's for scientists. You've got speakers right across it. Can you talk about the sort of breadth of topic that you'll be discussing?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the things that I think is most unique about our event. We have a lot of events in the sector that are very specific in terms of who they're for or the topics that they cover. And as you mentioned, at our event, we have attendees who are farmers, producers, entrepreneurs, executives, folks from right across the supply chain, scientists, students. And so we have to make sure that our topics are relevant to everyone, regardless of where they sit in the sector. And what that means is that we tend to tackle topics at a level of abstraction that is much more zoomed out than maybe some of the other events you might find. It means that if we have, for example, a talk, as we did last year, on aquaculture, that what we're interested in is not the nitty-gritty specifics of aquaculture that may or may not be relevant to someone who's in hort or someone who's in sheep and beef, but really the bigger principles of how this person is working to bring together ecosystems and to increase collaboration within aquaculture. So what are the things that could be potentially transferable to other parts of the sector? So this year we've got folks talking about innovation always. We've got technology. We're looking at AI, cellular agriculture, all that kind of stuff. We're looking, of course, at climate. And you mentioned earlier my history with Singularity University. We're welcoming Ramez Nam, who was track chair for climate at Singularity University for a decade. We are looking at water, we're looking at data, so really big picture kind of meaty topics. And one of the things that also I think is really critical is that in the topics that we're tackling, these are all, these are all reasonably kind of heavy conversations. And what we're really committed to is we're never going to frame up an us versus them adversarial dialogue. We're never going to artificially construct a panel where we've got, a climate scientist and a climate denier and have them battle it out. That's not at all our kaupapa. What we're interested in is how can we come together to have the kind of robust, profound conversations we need to have on these topics so that together we can lift our gaze a little higher, see a little bit further, and move forward more effectively.
That's a really good perspective of how to approach that. And yeah, I know that thing about tough conversations coming out. Last year, I was really excited. I attended one of when we could break out and choose which workshop we went to with the deeper dive. I sat in the room with Melissa Clark-Reynolds, and I was really excited about what she might bring to the table of exciting technologies or futurism insights that she's gathered. But she gave a talk about ethics, and initially I was like, what does it matter to me about this? Where do we get our baby milk formula from? But throughout that, it was actually one of the things I've reflected on quite a lot since the summit is just like, how do we determine what's ethical? Because it's tough. We're always faced with this decision, are we trying to feed the world, or are we trying to feed ourselves? Should we just have a really good product, or is actually having a lot of food that outcome we're seeking? And so it's nice to be able to have leaders such as Melissa and such as who you bring to the table to help guide us through stuff it is a tough conversation.
Yeah, Melissa is incredible. And that point that you made is exactly, I think, again, one of the unique things about our event, right? Is that we're not going to deliver, oh, you hear from Melissa, so she's only going to talk about, future scenarios, right? She's going to be thought-provoking. She's going to come at it from an angle that maybe we hadn't considered before. Likewise, the speakers we've got this year, right? We're going to be engaging with folks who are coming at things from directions that maybe we hadn't thought about so much, and maybe we should be thinking about, right? Claire Bradley from Agri-Sea, who typically would be talking about seaweed and sustainability in her work there, but I don't want to give too much away, but she's going to be coming at things from a very different angle of, how do we want to show up as leaders? What businesses do we want to build? What's it for? Why? And what does that mean in terms of how we need to operate? So all those really thorny questions, that's the kind of uncomfortable space that we like to play in.
That's awesome. And it gives it really adds to the attendee that is deeply involved in this space and researches these people and getting new thoughts in them. That's really valuable. And I guess this is exactly what you were just saying, but maybe if you could evolve on, like, what do you hope the attendee would get out of E Tipu? Like, what would you hope for that to result in?
Yeah. So my hope for our attendee, the purpose for the event is for the sector to be more innovative, collaborative, sustainable, and profitable now and into the future. And so that's the general kind of kaupapa. My hope for attendees is that attendees come away, number one, challenged, that there are things that are said on stage and conversations they have and dialogues they engage in that surprise them and make them think about things differently to how they did before they walked into the event. So that's one thing. The second thing is I want people to come away excited. I want people to come away feeling uplifted, feeling like, yes, we face huge challenges as a sector, as a society, not just a sector, right, but as a world. And there are hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of millions of people who are all working towards addressing these challenges. So this is not a journey that people are kind of, being forced to work slave on their own. This is something that kind of together we can tackle in an exciting way. And I want people to be excited about the opportunity for Aotearoa in this sector. It's our number one sector. It's our biggest export earner. It is the backbone of our economy. And in amongst those challenges, there is so much opportunity. And I want people to come away feeling like, man, I learned a whole bunch of new stuff and I am stoked and I can't wait to go back and start implementing things. And I made these amazing connections. So I'm not doing this journey on my own. And I'm really looking forward to what's to come.
I just love that. It's so important to have people come away excited and just to be excited about this sector. Yeah, when I was reflecting on just what message do I want to give, like in my personal talk at Future Whenua Summit, and I'm thinking just like, where am I at with all this and where have I come from? And it really was this plunge into nihilism and fatalism around what we're facing climatically. And that's just getting heated and more present for more and more people. And so as that becomes the norm, it's really important that we offer the hope, that we offer the excitement alongside with like the realities of our biosystem. And so, yeah, I know after last year, I was incredibly excited. And I remember Sarian Taylor, one of your speakers, said something about like, I'm all about this, I'm in this sector, innovation's my thing. And I hadn't heard of any of this, and likewise, I learned some things that I just like didn't even know existed in the world. So that's pretty awesome.
Awesome. It is something that I regularly struggle with, right? This balance between how do we face the challenges that exist, that are real, in a way that doesn't minimize them artificially, but in a way that also doesn't drive us into despair. And what I come back to is something called the Stockdale paradox. So the Stockdale paradox comes from Admiral Jim Stockdale, who was in the US military during the Vietnam War. And in 1965, his plane was shot down over North Vietnam, and he was taken prisoner and held captive in the infamous Hanoi Hilton for 7.5 years. So he underwent horrific torture. He had to do horrific things in order to survive. And when he came out, they asked him, what was the difference between the folks who made it through and the folks who didn't? And kind of more specifically, the folks who didn't make it through, what did those folks have in common? And he said, oh, that's easy. The ones who didn't make it through, those were the optimists. They were the ones who said, we'll be home by Christmas. And Christmas would come and Christmas would go. And they'd say, we'll be home by Easter. And Easter would come and Easter would go. And they'd say, we'll be home by Thanksgiving, by November. Thanksgiving would come and go. And he said, Christmas would roll around again and they would die of a broken heart. He said, the ones who made it through were the ones who never confused total faith that they would prevail in the end, which is something you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of our current reality, no matter how challenging they may be. So that combination, that kind of total faith that we'll prevail with the discipline to confront the brutal facts, that became known as the Stockdale paradox. To me, it's not a paradox in the slightest. In my view, the only way we can prevail is by being willing to confront the most brutal facts of our current reality, no matter how challenging they may be. That is what gives us the power to be able to make the kind of choices we need to make, the kind of decisions we need to make, to develop the strategies that can allow us to capitalize on opportunities instead of only being terrified of challenges. And that's really what we bring into this event. So it's neither a nihilistic despair, nor is it an unfounded, hopey, changey, we're all going to hold hands and everything's going to be great. It is really this thing of going, we're going to look at things as best we can as they are. We're not going to sugarcoat them. We're not going to tell stories about them. We're not going to make them bigger or smaller. We're going to look at them as they are. And what that is going to do is it's going to give us the power to choose what we want to do about it and where we want to go next.
Stockdale paradox. Thank you for sharing that. That helps me a lot in just this internal thing that I continuously deal with. And yeah, I know a lot of our actions on farm, what I'm striving towards, what I've been building over the years. Initially, it was quite prepper, and when I was like, learning to grow food and trying to build a community, coming from this place of being a prepper, like a doomsday prepper. I remember that to actually, if I can do the exact same actions, but instead of it being in preparation for some event like that, but it's actually for this vision of something that's beautiful. And so now I do quite often envision like what is the truest potential of this land. And like, I'm not a great meditator, but I am a good daydreamer. And so I'll sit there and I'll just try and think like, what is the most amazing scene that I can create? And what turns out is the actions that it would take to get to that scene are the same actions to the same scene as the prepper style. So it's like, yeah, the Stockdale paradox, you said it beautifully there on that front. So how do you go about selecting your speakers, your lineup? You know, there's a lot of people doing interesting stuff out there.
It is definitely one of the hardest aspects of my job. And, you know, typically we start with a few people who we just think are so amazing that we want to hear from them kind of no matter what. But then as soon as we've got a few of those pillars established, we zoom out and we go, okay, what are the real kind of hot button topics? What are the real trends and trajectories? We lean heavily on our brain trust in that regard. What is it you really need to hear about? What is it that you know, those folks really have their fingers on the pulse? And so we check in with them, you know, what are they hearing that's really important? We try to, you know, as we progress, we continually zoom out and look at the program as a whole, not just kind of a collection of individual speakers. We want to make sure that we're covering a range of topics, a range of ideas, you know, left brain, right brain stuff. We want to be covering stuff from folks with lots of experience and folks who are, you know, young innovators. We want to be hearing from folks who are from big companies and folks who are from who are more, you know, independent, kind of smaller outfits. We want to be covering a range from, you know, technology, brain stuff to heart stuff. So we really try to make sure we have the most kind of diverse lineup that we possibly can. And then we try to build it all together into, as I said, a coherent narrative so that it's more than just a bunch of individual speakers that are disconnected, that actually it tells a story as you go through the 2 days, that by the time you come out the end, you know, we hopefully have that impact that we're looking to have, where people come away going, man, I found that so challenging and so thought-provoking. And I'm not coming away feeling like, you know, it's overwhelming and I'm in despair. I'm coming away feeling like I'm excited and geared up to process what I've just heard and learned and to put it all into practice in my own life.
Fantastic. It's not just a lineup of speakers giving 20-minute talks. There's these deeper dive sessions. There's an area where we can go, and some businesses are showing all their offerings. What else is there at E Tipu than speaker audience?
Oh yeah, so you're spot on. So we've got obviously the main stage talks. We have a couple of panels on the main stage this year as well, and a couple of little kind of tasty morsels that you just have to attend the event to experience. We've got a bunch of breakout sessions. We've got some amazing breakout sessions. We've got a breakout session on climate, specifically in the Pacific. We've got a breakout session on the Fit for a Better World initiative, as well as one on Sapuna Whakaaro Nui, the reports that have just come out from them. We've got a breakout session on data. We've got a breakout session on water, one on safer farms. We've got Q&As. So one of the things that we're doing this year, it's a little different, is that we're not doing Q&As on stage during the breakouts, that we'll consolidate the speakers who have preceded that breakout session, and there'll be a virtual opportunity to engage with them for Q&A. So for the folks who are tuning in virtually, they can ask their questions directly of the speakers. We've got all of the exhibits. We got an amazing group of exhibitors this year. We've got our E Tipu bookshop, so people can get amazing books. We've got our hub, so you know, we've got 2 hangout areas, so people can don't have to sit in the theater the whole 2 days. They can go sit on a beanbag, or you know, stand at a bar leaner, or sit at a desk if they need to kind of do some work, but also still want to be watching the events. And then the biggest thing, of course, is the kai. We are so proud of the food that we serve. We really walk our talk on this front. We have some incredible food and drink partners. We showcase local. One of the things that I'm most proud of with this event is that the first time we ran it in 2019, we challenged Dan Shanks, the executive chef at Venues Autotehi, to source everything that he was sourcing. We wanted him to source local. And he was like, I don't know if I can do that, but he was up for the challenge and he did it. And as a result of that event, they made the commitment at Venues, which of course is the company that runs not only the town hall, but also the stadium and the arena and, the Air Force Museum, all the venues around Christchurch. And so as a result of that event, Venues Otote, he switched their procurement policy and they moved from procuring 5% local produce to 90% local produce since 2019. So that's something I'm incredibly proud of. And Dan uses this event every year as an opportunity to showcase his most creative ideas when it comes to kai. And of course, it's Matariki week. And so we're featuring some wonderful Maori chefs, contributions from some wonderful Maori chefs, and we will have a hangi on day one. So looking forward to that as well.
Wow, that is amazing. And yeah, from last year, I could have probably listed 10 speakers that were my favorite. But Dan Shanks, when he spoke, because he delivered a talk alongside just outlaying what we had on the menu, and he told part of that story. And actually, when we left and thought about it, I was like, I think Dan Shanks was my favorite talk. That was just so inspiring, because we can source our food locally. And if more people did it, especially people that are ordering of that, quantity and caliber, then that's going to make a ripple effect, isn't it? So
yeah, we love Dan so much. And, we won an award for our catering from the New Zealand Events Association. And Dan and Granville Pitama, who's our hangi master, and Rosaria Ferguson from Boma, and I went up to Auckland to accept this award. And we laid down a challenge for the entire events industry. And we were like, look, if we can do it in Christchurch, we should be doing this everywhere. There's no reason why we shouldn't be taking the opportunity of every event to showcase what we have to offer, showcase our unique produce, our unique kai, and yeah, put it front and center.
Good on you. Keep making those challenges that people step up. And yeah, I just remember last year having that beautiful kai and sitting out on the steps, and I got to connect with Angela Clifford, who's just a chief of the food systems locally.
It's amazing.
And then later I talked with Tangaroa Walker, and we were just like this tight connection, and we're two Southland farmers trying to make a difference and hadn't crossed paths until that moment. And that it goes on and on, the people that I met and was able to connect with over kai and wandering around in between the inspirational talks. So awesome. Thank you so much for my experience last week, and I'm very, very excited for 2 weeks' time. This is organized by Boma. Could you tell us first what is Boma? Where does that name come from? And then also just see it into the organization itself.
Yeah, so Boma is a company whose vision is for a world full of intentional, intelligent, and courageous leaders. And the word itself comes from Africa and refers to the enclosure where the elders and community gather to have meaningful conversations, make meaningful decisions, and take meaningful action. I have a co-founder who's from South Africa, and so that's her connection to that culture. And we do what we do in a variety of ways. That everything that we do comes under the general umbrella of transformational learning experiences. And so obviously E Tipu is our flagship event in the food and fiber sector. We can't have a conversation about an intentional, intelligent, and courageous Aotearoa without engaging with the food and fiber sectors. And then we also run a number of open enrollment programs. We run a transformational directors program for people who have board roles, a transformational executives program for executives and senior leaders. We run the Dare to Lead program with its curriculum from Brene Brown. So I had the opportunity of training with Brene Brown a few years ago. She's a kind of celebrity academic who studies courage, empathy, vulnerability, and shame. And Dare to Lead is a empirically based courage building curriculum to build kind of daring cultures within organizations. And then we do a lot of custom work with organizations as well. We work with a lot of senior leadership teams and then broader teams throughout organizations to tackle culture, disruption. Really the space we play in is what we call it the intersection of what we need to know and who we need to be, where what we need to know is all the external stuff that's happening in our world, exponential technology, supply chain disruption, climate change, geopolitics, and then the who we need to be is the internal stuff. How do we need to show up as leaders in order to be effective, in order to lead well, and really in order to thrive in this incredibly volatile and uncertain world?
Fantastic. Yeah, what we need to know and who we need to be. There's a lot of focus on how do we do it? How do we get to motivate? How do we make small changes? But it's if we ask the question, who do we need to be to get to that place? That's really powerful. Yeah. And I love that name. Yeah, the meeting place where elders and
community gather. Yeah,
community gather to make decisions. Yeah,
it's a physical structure, usually made of branches.
Okay.
Yeah,
very cool.
Our office is not so much made of branches, but there is a lot of wood here.
There is a lot of wood. Yeah, maybe that's a future goal. Build a Boma somewhere.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. Dare to lead. There's a lot you went there, and we want to dive in. Dare to lead, Brené Brown. What's involved with that curriculum?
Yeah, so basically what happened, Brené's been doing this research for a long time, but the Dare to Lead curriculum came out of a specific study that's been ongoing for about 10 years now, being done in partnership with Rice, Kellogg, and Wharton Schools of Business. And the study began with them interviewing 150 global C-suite executives, so CEOs, CFOs, CIOs from major multinationals. And they asked them a single question, which was, what do you believe is the number one most important characteristic for leaders to have in the next 5, 10, 15 years and beyond? What is the thing that will distinguish the standout leaders from the ones who don't do so well? And what's really going to be the difference between the ones who are still standing and the ones who aren't in 10 or 15 years time? And the answer that came back was kind of unequivocal, no close seconds. The number one thing we need to see from our leaders is courage. Okay, sounds awesome. Who doesn't want courage? We all do. Hands up, right? What does that mean in practice? What does that look like? And these folks were like, oh, it's kind of hard to explain. You sort of know when you see it. It's, it's not easy to describe. Some people are born with it. You either have it or you don't. Just like, okay, that's not really very helpful. Let's try it from another angle. What does it look like when there's a lack of courage in organizations? Oh, and then heaps of answers for lack of courage, right? No shortage there. But again, one answer above all, no close seconds. The number one thing we see when there's a lack of courage in an organization is that we have an inability to have tough conversations. And because we have an inability to have tough conversations, a whole heap of other things flow from that. We don't have tough conversations, so we don't talk about fears and feelings. Trust starts to undermine because if I have an issue with you, instead of just talking to you about it and getting it resolved, I talk to everyone else about you and undermine you. We don't make progress on diversity, equity, and inclusion because those are super hard conversations to have. We don't take ownership of our mistakes because we spend so much time trying to cover things up and pretend like we never did anything wrong. And so really the heart of all of that is the ability to have tough conversations. And so they're like, okay, great. We got a really clear picture of what it looks like when there's a lack of courage in an organization, but we still need to know kind of what we're aiming for. So they kept going with the research, kept digging in, went further into those interviews. And ultimately what emerged from the data was that far from being this kind of vague, nebulous, you have it or you don't thing, courage actually comprises 4 very specific skill sets that are teachable, measurable, and observable. And they are, number 1, our ability to lean into and navigate vulnerability. Number 2, our ability to live into our values, to turn our values from fluffy words on the wall into tangible and practical behaviors to which we can hold ourselves and each other to account. Number 3, our ability to trust and be trustworthy. And that specific skill set breaks down into 7 elements of trust that emerged from the data. And number 4, learning to rise. And learning to rise is basically about resilience, about recognizing the physics of courage, which are such that if you are brave enough often enough, at some point it's going to go terribly wrong. And what you choose to do at that moment will be the difference between whether being a courageous leader becomes part and parcel of how you show up every single day, or whether it's, that thing that you heard a talk on that one time. So the Dare to Lead curriculum is really a curriculum that is built around those 4 skill sets. And, I'll tell you what, when I did my training with Brene to facilitate it, I went into that training. This is an area where there's so much risk of superficiality, right? There are a lot of folks who play in the space of tough conversations, who play in the space of courage, where, who will say things like, oh, well, you just need to be brave, or you just, need to, whatever, like things that are like, well, no, that doesn't really, it's not that simple, right? And so when I went to do this training, I was, I wasn't sold before I did the training. I was attentive to, is this robust and real, or is this going to be, superficial? And again, that kind of, we're just going to hold hands and sing songs and everything's going to be wonderful. And I cannot tell you how gratified I was to find that this research is robust and profound. It is evidence-based, it's, empirically based. And I have, since I did that training, I've now facilitated this material for well over 2,000 people, and it only gets richer. And so it's an incredible privilege to facilitate the Dare to Lead curriculum. And what, the feedback we get from organizations is that it utterly transforms the way that their teams show up and the way they're able to perform together.
It's really incredible work, and so cool that you got to train with Brene. From all accounts, she's just a truly authentic, not talking but walking this stuff. And so that sounds like a really rich experience. I assume it's not just about educating the people in these classes about what courage is, but actually giving them tools that they can use. How does that transfer from just more information to something that applies, and how does one, embody or practice courageousness?
Yeah. So 100%. In fact, one of the things that's most gratifying is just how grounded and practical the curriculum is. And so we give people very specific tools to go, okay, I leave this program and I need to go and have a tough conversation with Zeb. What exactly am I going to say? How exactly am I going to remain grounded? How exactly am I going to, make sure that I'm showing up with a willingness to lean into vulnerability? What specific phrase might I use to help bring me back into my values if the temperature starts to go up and I start to get a little bit salty? What can I do if I go into that conversation and I'm planning to be my absolute best self, and then the first thing Zeb says is the thing that just presses all my buttons, and I lose it and yell at him? Like, what do I do then? And so we get very, very specific so that people are kind of well geared up to take this material and go and apply it straight away. Really interestingly, we run this event, those programs, both in person as 3 full-day programs back to back. We also run them virtually. And the virtual programs, we do them 2.5 hours a day, Monday to Friday, for 2 weeks. When we first started running the virtual programs, I was not at all sure how it was going to go. Those programs, it's a pretty big emotional ask. Like, we really ask people to show up and do a lot of work. It's not a simple thing. And so we weren't at all sure how it was going to work virtually. And we started running them when we first went into lockdown. And what we found is that we get just as good feedback on virtual as face-to-face, that there are advantages to virtual that we can't replicate in physical, and advantages to physical that we can't replicate in virtual. And so now we run the virtual programs, even when there's no obligation to. We run both physical and virtual because they're just 2 different products. One of the huge advantages of the virtual program is that because it's spread out over the 2 weeks, almost everyone who participates in the virtual program at some point during the 2 weeks has the opportunity to apply the material in the wild. And so there's kind of no substitute to being able to come back to the group and go, oh my gosh, I had that tough conversation with my boss yesterday and it was amazing and I can't believe I did it. Or I had that tough conversation with my boss yesterday and it was terrible. It was a total disaster. What do I do now? And to be able to kind of have that lived experience of it is just priceless for people.
Yeah, I know from my experience, just as, you know, trying to come up and start business and not having that experience and never having been taught to have tough conversations, but just, you know, like Rob and I, Future Whenua, where one of the things that makes us strong is it's just, we've done that, had the tough conversations, and then you build it up in your mind, and you know, a week can go by and it just builds. If there's no release valve on there, it'll become something nasty, or else it will have to get suppressed, and it's not gone just because it's been suppressed. And then you have that conversation and it's all good, you know. Maybe sometimes it's not comfortable, but it doesn't blow up in the way that you mentalize it when you go over and over. So
yeah. You know, I've got 3 stepsons, and I use them as kind of guinea pigs for my stuff all the time. And we had this situation once where the oldest boy and the middle boy had gotten into a bit of a stoush over something. And the middle boy had run into his room and slammed the door and locked the door and wouldn't come out. And the oldest boy was standing outside his brother's door, facing the door. And I was standing next to him, waiting for him to knock on the door and apologize. So you can, I'm sure, envision this scenario, right? And he's standing there grumpy, not wanting to apologize at all. And so he stands there for a minute, you know, arms crossed, super sulky face. And then finally he looks at me and he goes, I don't want to. And I said, you know, I totally get that. You still have to. And he goes, my tummy hurts. And I was like, you know, I totally get that too. When I have to do something that I'm afraid of or that's difficult, my tummy hurts too. And what I can tell you is that that feeling in your tummy right now, when I have that feeling, that is the flashing lights, neon arrow waving flag of this is the thing I must do. And right now, you got 2 choices. Either you knock on the door and apologize to your brother. And when you apologize to him, what you're actually doing is you're speaking that feeling. It'll come out of your tummy and it'll disappear into the ether, and you will never have to think about it again. You can wave goodbye to it. You can forget about it. Or you walk away, you don't apologize. And what will happen is that feeling will turn into a little brick and you'll carry it around. And after a time, you might forget that you've got it in there, but it'll be in there. And the next time you walk away from a difficult conversation, you'll add another little brick and another one and another one. I can tell you, as adults, we are all walking around with our collections of bricks, right? And then what happens is they come out in different ways, right? But we never get rid of them if we don't actually address them. And often when we look at the Dare to Lead curriculum, one of the things that I say about it is that if I had to sum up the entire program in one sentence, what I would say is that the program is a program about letting us deal with what is actually going on. Yeah.
Fantastic. So admirable that you're able to pass on those lessons, not just to the people in your course, but also to these young boys, which will, you know, be able to build with that stuff. You know, when you learn it at that age, it can grow, and you know, they might grow up with a few less bricks, for sure. And yeah, that's one of your courses. You mentioned transformational leaders. I won't dive into all the courses that you run or all the activities of Boma, but thanks for diving into that as an example. It's really incredible. And you know, is there a long-term vision with Boma? Do you want to be, you know, advisor to the king? What's the goal with Boma?
I have never contemplated being advisor to the king. 100% We are looking at what we do to scale globally. And so one of the things that we're working on right now that I'm incredibly proud of is that Boma is the official and exclusive leadership training provider to the Crusaders, to the rugby team. We work with all of the senior leaders within the Crusaders organization, as well as with Scott Robertson, Razor, the head coach. And we are working with them now on a program for rugby leaders, rugby coaches worldwide. It's a coaching leadership program, and it's leveraging what's called a cohort-based course. So it's an opportunity for us to be able to scale some of our work more broadly without losing any of the impact that we have. You know, one of the biggest things for us is going, okay, we want to reach a wider audience, and what we cannot do is dilute the impact of what we're trying to deliver. You know, we look at amazing programs like, you know, Masterclass, where we have this opportunity to kind of on-demand ad hoc digital offerings. But what we find is that when it's fully on demand, fully digital in that way, that engagement really drops. And that one of the most powerful things we can do to ensure that people apply learning, that they remain engaged, that they get outcomes, not just, you know, a certificate at the end, but outcome behavior change and then real outcomes in their lives, is to learn with others. And this program that we're delivering with the Crusaders is one that's going to leverage cohort-based learning in order to allow people to learn together.
Yeah, community and people to share the journey with is definitely a more powerful way to learn, and can cement, and you know, and you have to show up. So yeah, I hope Razor gets to share some of his dance moves with you in return.
Yep, he absolutely has done. Razor did our transformational executives program, and was, as you can imagine, an absolute delight to have on the program.
I bet, yeah. Oh, fantastic. Okay, so that's Boma. You've been involved in some other stuff as well. Perhaps this was beneath or part of Boma, or part of the evolution of it. But you organised the TEDx events in Christchurch and also in Antarctica. And broad question, just do you have any stories from that whole saga?
So you know, I had the great privilege of curating TEDx Christchurch for 10 years, and TEDx got based in Antarctica. You know, the biggest thing that I would say came out of that Antarctic experience. So, you know, I've been paying attention to climate change for a long time. I trained with Al Gore to deliver the Inconvenient Truth presentation in 2009. And, you know, I consider myself reasonably well versed on it. When I ran TEDx Scott Base, I got to work with a number of climate scientists, including people like Christina Hulba, who's a glaciologist who has a glacier named after her, the Hulba Glacier. And what I found was that the climate situation is almost inevitably more dire than what scientists are willing to say publicly. And what happens is, you know, they're scientists, right? So they have to be very careful and very precise. And with math, we can be very precise, right? We can say 5 + 5 = 10. With science, we have to say, well, our best hypothesis is this. And as more evidence comes in, we're going to upgrade the hypothesis. But of course, the general public often holds scientists to account for a level of precision that's unreasonable to expect from science, that you'd expect from math and not science. And so scientists have to be very careful, right? When we saw this, of course, with COVID, as you know, people were coming out with, here's the latest information we have, and now we've learned more, so we're upgrading our models. But people go, well, that's not what you said before, so how could that can't be true, or how can we trust you, right? And so the you know, the data sets, when we look at the models, and then we look at actual outcomes, what we see is I've never yet seen an actual outcome that's coming in like under, you know, in the better than the best case scenario that the model is predicting. They're almost inevitably worse than the worst case scenario, right? So we have to really be taking that seriously. no, we can't, we're well past any kind of time where we can go, oh, well, we're still waiting to see what happens, right? It's something that we have to be, has to be front and center in everything that we do. And of course, you might have seen just this week, we got that data out that, from Antarctica, that they found microplastics in every sample that they took of freshly fallen snow. So new snow falling in Antarctica contains microplastics, and pretty substantive amounts. And so the idea that any part of this world is separate or insulated from any other part of this world is just a complete fallacy. And so even if we're looking at, scenarios for New Zealand saying, oh, well, it won't hurt that much because, this is what is likely to happen in this area or in this region, or, if this region goes up by 2 degrees, it'll still be good for growing kiwi fruit or whatever it may be. It doesn't mean that we get to not take climate change seriously. We still have to be absolutely thinking about what our response is, not just thinking about, but acting on substantive responses to it, and doing it in a way that allows us to be intentional and thoughtful about what we want to do, and that doesn't force us into being reactive to crises. Because there's no version of this where we get to come away and not do anything. We either get to choose now what we want to do and do it, or we wait and then it gets forced on us. So I'm all for intentional activity.
Yeah, that's quite a sobering thing to have observed firsthand. And reading this book, Ministry for the Future, at the moment, and it's like in
the
terms
opening
of
scene of that book. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's fairly dense, and then there's a lot of activity down in Antarctica, and it's it's sort of in terms of that creating a visual. This does create a vision in the future, but it's not necessarily one I want to be seeing.
I would say just the opening scene of that book is one of the most effective scenes I've ever read in terms of making a future scenario viscerally real, right? Like that this is actually a plausible scenario within the visible future, right? Like for your listeners or watchers who have not read that book, at a minimum, just read the first chapter. It's intense.
And also read the whole book. It's amazing.
Yes,
it's really
also
cool
read the whole book. Yeah.
And there are some pretty sobering. I think the largest river in the world right now is an under glacier river that just flows beneath between the bedrock and the ice, and so this is getting larger and larger, and it can just pop a whole bunch of it into the ocean at any time, really. So
it's one of the things I think we also tend to underappreciate is the potential for nonlinear events. And so, we think, oh, well, if sea level rise is happening at, 0.1 millimeter or half a millimeter or a millimeter a year, whatever it is, that it will continue kind of steadily doing that. And so we will have a steady amount of time as it continues in order to respond appropriately. And, again, one of the things that COVID was able to show us so beautifully is that things don't always happen in a linear fashion. And when, we go from 100 cases a day to 10,000 cases a day, we can see how we might need to be prepped up much earlier than we think we otherwise needed to.
I was about to dive down a bit of a hole there, but I don't think we need to go any further. You mentioned non-linear, and another way of saying that is exponential. And so you also have this history with Singularity U, and a big part of what their whole message is, their co-popper is developing and exploring the ideas around exponential tech. So I wondered if you could just tell us a bit more about what that is and what that means to us.
Yeah, absolutely. I will just clarify, when I say nonlinear, exponential is one possibility, but not the only possibility. So for example, an earthquake is a nonlinear event, right? Like it'll the two plates will shear against each other like a little, and then snap. And that's not an exponential process, but that's a nonlinear disruption in terms of their positioning. And so when I think about climate change, and nonlinear impacts in climate change, I think it's worth thinking not just about exponential impacts, but also things like a big chunk of ice sliding into the sea all at once, right? So, so when we talk about exponential tech from a Singularity University perspective, the premise there is looking at technologies where the price performance is doubling on a consistent basis. And what we mean by price performance is either, how much performance can you get for a fixed price, or how much is the price coming down for a fixed level of performance. The best known example of this is Moore's Law. Gordon Moore, one of the co-founders of Intel in 1965, made the observation that the number of transistors we could fit on an integrated circuit had been doubling every 18 months as far back as we could see. And he made a prediction that that number would continue to double as far forward as we could see. It's the best known example. It's by no means the only example. Ray Kurzweil, one of the co-founders of Singularity University, actually said the thing that's interesting about Moore's Law isn't the transistors on an integrated circuit at all. It's the price performance of computing. How many million instructions per second can you buy for $1,000, right? Fixed price. How much performance can we get? That number has been doubling since the dawn of computing for over 120 years, starting with electromechanical punch cards, relays, vacuum tubes. Like Moore's Law is actually the 5th iteration of the same underlying doubling phenomenon. And it's not just computing, right? We see it in LED lights. We see it, which is powering the uptake of indoor farming, right? Indoor farming, because LED lighting and the other associated technologies used to be so expensive, there was no way that it could be price competitive with traditional produce. But LED lighting has come down in price by 90-95% in the past decade, and doubled, tripled in terms of lifespan. So now all of a sudden these technologies, if you imagine the kind of computing power you have in your phone compared to the Apollo space missions, right? Same sort of thing with indoor farming. We're seeing the same thing with gene sequencing, right? Like, if COVID had hit 10, 20 years ago, there's no way, we're literally impossible to be doing the gene sequencing that we did for this current virus. And so what all that unlocks is radically different approaches to the world and what we do. And also what it means is that we have to be willing to contemplate that business models and products that we would have thought were absolutely non-viable in the past are things that we actually have to face as being very viable, right? So that's where things like cellular agriculture start to come into play. It's where things like indoor farming start to come into play. And to loop all this back around to E Tipu, which is where we started, because I know we're almost out of time, one of our speakers, Adama Kukutai, is the chief executive of Plenty, which is one of the largest indoor farming companies in the world, vertical farming companies in the world. And in January this year, they closed a $400 million Series E capital raise with Walmart as a strategic partner. So they're selling into Walmart's the largest retailer in the world, and they're selling their produce into every Walmart in the world. And this is mainstream scale competitive product. So so as much as we like to think, oh well, we don't need to think about that stuff because we're just premium producers down here in clean green New Zealand, and there'll always be a market for our stuff. We have to be paying attention to those trends in order to make sure, again, that we don't get caught, on the back foot.
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of hope in the technical revolution. I've definitely spent time on the climate fatalism and techno optimism. I've well and truly been there, and I've followed Singularity U, and Peter Diamandis, one of the other co-founders, has this newsletter Future Loop, and it's set out by an AI version of himself, and it's quite good. But every time it comes out, it's just like, oh wow, we're so close to autonomous micro flyers, and it's really inspiring just what people are working on in the world. And yeah, I hope that there's not a rough intersection between the two things that we've just discussed, because exponential tech in a finite world is there's a place where that meets. And it's a good thing that there's the most powerful minds working on this stuff. And it is cool. It is an intersection that E Tipu, it's present there. There's regenerative agriculture and there's cellular agriculture. And yeah, it was something I did, like a written visual. It was a sort of journey into Future Whenua Summit of the future, and it was Charles Eisenstein and Peter Diamandis both speaking, and I think there was sort of like a nuance in that bit of writing that not many people would land with. I'm sure you would appreciate it because it's sort of, it's very contrasting, but there's a space where those two contrasts meet that we can take a really powerful step forward into the future. So I would just want to thank you so much for everything that you've done along that journey and to get to where you are. And thank you for E Tipu. It really is a powerful offering and just so well considered. And just all the work that you're doing to leave a more intentional, intelligent and courageous world. So yeah, if there's anything you'd like to finish on.
Just look, so first of all, I'm just so grateful for your work as well. I've been following Future Whenua for a while now. And of course, I always love seeing your face at Tipu. And I just really admire anyone who is taking action to try to build the world that we want. And am so grateful and honored and humbled for you to have me on your show. So it's been a real privilege for me to be here with you.
Brilliant. And I couldn't finish without saying, if you don't have a ticket yet, get yourself to Christchurch in 2 weeks' time. It's going to be incredible. And if you can't get to Christchurch, the virtual option exists. And likewise with these Dare to Lead programs, you could get around, do one in person or do one virtually. Your life will be better for it. I'm very sure of it. Thank you very much, Kaila.
Thank you, Zeb. So appreciate it.
Yeah, keep going.